Today is Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Antros. The former French president heads to prison. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can always email us as well, right to our inbox, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're so glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day each and every weekday, bright and early. And today, joining me, CBN's Billy Hallowell, and we have a lot to get to, as always, on the focus story. A new Dead Sea Scroll exhibit is coming to the Museum of the Bible.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that exhibit, the significance of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and much, much more.
All right, looking forward to that coming up in just a moment on the focus story. Also, on the main thing, ex-psychic Jenn Nizza is warning about the dangers of the Ouija board, other tools of divination. Billy and Raj are breaking it down on the main thing, the dangers surrounding Halloween, which is coming up. So that's on the main thing. You don't want to miss that. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts. As always, those links are right there in the description. Make sure you're checking those out. And don't forget, discover how the New Testament came to be, Oracles of God, the story of the New Testament from CBN Films. You can go to that in theaters on 3 select dates, November 2nd, November 3rd, or November 5th. Get your tickets now at cbnfilms.com. And with that, we're going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And 3 weeks in, still no deal. The government shutdown is now stretched to 20 days. As the Senate failed for the 11th time to move forward on a House bill that would reopen the government. Vote fell short again, 50-43, with no new Democrats joining Republicans, leaving no clear path forward. Senate Majority Leader John Thune says Democrats are holding funding hostage over health care demands, while Democrats insist any deal must include extensions to Obamacare tax credits and a rollback of new Medicaid limits. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he'll call the House back to Washington only if the Senate passes a measure to pay federal workers and the military during the shutdown, but he doubts that will happen. The political blame game keeps on continuing. Democrats are calling it Trump shutdown, while Republicans accuse them of refusing to negotiate. And former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has begun serving a 5-year prison sentence after being convicted of conspiring to raise illegal campaign funds from Libya's Muammar Gaddafi during his 2007 run for office. Sarkozy's now 70. He's the first French leader since World War II to be jailed. He arrived at prison in Paris, cheered by supporters chanting his name as he walked hand in hand with his wife. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And obviously, France is France, and they're going to do what they're going to do. But I saw this story, and it just made me think, man, I feel like America's going down this road with the way political opponents are going after each other, and particularly the way Democrats went after Trump with all these different charges they tried to conjure up to get him into prison. It's like really difficult situation because, of course, you don't want anyone to be above the law, but we also don't want to turn into a banana republic where presidents are getting thrown into prison. And so I'm not claiming to be an expert on the details of the Sarkozy case, so that's not really the reason that I'm bringing it up. I'm bringing it up just because it's kind of a shock to the system, and it made me think, oh, I hope America's future is not one of what we saw with Trump, where there were just all these charges being brought up, many times clearly politically motivated. And so just a kind of a shocking scene to see a president there trotted off into prison.
Yeah, I mean, this is so complicated too. I almost think, and I don't even want to say it, but I almost think there are times where might be minor crimes or things that happen, and not that you want to look the other way when it comes to presidents, but that you have to be careful because the perception of what's created, you have to weigh the odds. Is it really worth going to this extent to lock someone up? when the perception is going to be that you're in a banana republic. And so I don't know, it's such a tough thing, but the reality is we have seen in this country, and it can happen on both sides, but I think the last, under Trump's first term after he left, I think we really saw attempts to just go after him legally, and they seem to be attempts to prevent him from running for president again.
Right.
That's what it sort of felt like. Again, it doesn't mean there was no malfeasance or nothing bad happened, but I think the point is you have to really look at the optics, especially for a country like ours. What is this going to say to the rest of the world if we pursue this? And so my hope is that at some point, someone here stops this, because it is not the way you want to be operating, and it can quickly spin out of control.
Yeah, it really can. And again, if there are legitimate crimes committed, I mean, he's accused of having Libya fund his presidential campaign in return for favors for Libya. And obviously that's not good. And you don't want that to happen either. There's
that wouldn't be a minor thing.
No, it's not a minor thing if that's indeed true. And again, like I said, I haven't studied the details of that case, but point is it's a troubling trend, and you got to find that balance. They can't be above the law, but also you can't be doing lawfare. So it's something hopefully that we can find our footing on here in the future, and it doesn't spiral out of control. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now, and a Dead Sea Scroll exhibit is coming to the Museum of the Bible. What did Dr. Bobby Duke say about the significance of these scrolls?
So he is the chief curatorial officer at the Museum of the Bible in DC, and this exhibit is opening in November and will offer an exploration of these, Dead Sea Scrolls. He told us that really the significance of these biblical manuscripts, it's pretty big. I mean, the discovery really revolutionized biblical understanding. He said before 1947, our best Hebrew manuscripts came from about 1000 AD. And when the first cave was found in 1947, it shaved off 1,000 years of manuscript transmission and let us see what the Hebrew Bible was like, what scrolls were like around the time of Jesus and the disciples. So this discovery took, basically to translate that, and this is why the Dead Sea Scrolls are so important. You had manuscripts that went back 1,000 years. Now you have manuscripts for the Old Testament that go back 2,000 years, essentially to Jesus's time. And those scrolls were found essentially by accident in the 1940s. Apparently, there were some teenagers tending to goats and sheep, and one of them threw a stone, and it went into this cave, and they heard something shatter. And then they went in and they found these. They found these containers essentially with these scrolls in them, and then they found other scrolls in other nearby caves. And so you ended up finding all these well-preserved texts by accident that, again, have revolutionized the way we look at Old Testament scripture, the reliability of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And how the scrolls changed his perception of the Bible.
Yeah, so for Duke in particular, he's a biblical expert. He said his personal studies of the Dead Sea Scrolls gave him more confidence in the Bible, particularly when it comes to the significance of English translations that we're reading today, that we can know they're incredibly similar. They're the same. Nothing has changed. That, when you find manuscripts that date back 2,000 years for the Old Testament and they're identical to what we're reading today, and you have evidence of that, you've gone back an extra 1,000 years and you've been given that reliability of scripture to know, okay, it hasn't all been rewritten and changed 45,000 times over the last 2,000 years. Those Old Testament scriptures. And by the way, every single Old Testament book is represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls except for the book of Esther. That is the only book that is not represented there. It's probably missing the scroll, or they haven't found it yet. But Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, is the only complete book. But all of it, all of the Old Testament is represented in those scrolls.
Yeah,
except for Esther.
Truly incredible. And that is the main critique you hear oftentimes from secular proponents or atheists. They say, oh, it's just a book that's been translated, game of phone, whatever, down the line, where it gets changed a little bit by little bit at a time over hundreds of years and thousands of years, and it changes. Well, obviously, when we have discoveries like this, it disproves that theory in a dramatic fashion. So if you go to the Museum of the Bible and you go to check out this exhibit, what are they going to see?
So they're going to see, obviously, some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is pretty amazing. They're also going to have wood fragments from something called the Jesus boat. This is the first century boat that would have been like what Jesus and the disciples would have used on the Sea of Galilee. There's also a number of other things. The Magdala stone that was found at the site of Magdala, the hometown of Mary Magdalene. So there's going to be a lot of archaeological pieces to the puzzle that will be part of this exhibit, and the exhibit's going to go until the end of, I think, September of 2026. So this is going to be something that comes with different waves over the next year and a half or so, but pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And did you have anything else to say about the impact of the scrolls and what we're seeing culturally with this?
Yeah, he said the big impact is the book of Isaiah. The fact that the scroll has the entire book, all 66 chapters, he said, looking at that is really interesting, because when you go to Isaiah 117, where it talks about taking care of the orphans and the widows, he said that message that Isaiah wrote in the 8th century that we see in the Dead Sea Scrolls from 2,000 years ago is still a message we have today. He said, so just to think, even our Christian practice of how we do good in the world is something that we can see on those scrolls from 2,000 years ago, just like we read in our Bibles today. So he was connecting just how cool it is that you see that Christian message in Isaiah. We're still living that out today, and the consistency is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it really is. And you wouldn't, when you have people who are critics of the Bible and critics of faith and critics of Christianity, this is one of the things you point back to. But those same people wouldn't apply those standards to other artifacts of history and written documents of history. You wouldn't need the amount and the just overwhelming amount of evidence there is, like you said, about all these scriptures that are remarkably similar, thousands of years apart. It's truly remarkable, and any honest observer, I think, would have to admit that.
Yeah, absolutely. So lots to unpack there, but it'll be a great exhibit. People should go and check that out.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Appreciate you bringing that to the podcast today. If you're in the area, make sure you're checking it out. All right, we're going to go to the main thing now. An ex-psychic, Jenn Nizza, is warning about the dangers of engaging in tools of divination this Halloween. Ouija board, tarot cards, other kind of activities like that. Well, Billy and Raj are here to talk about and warn about the evils surrounding this quote-unquote holiday of Halloween. That's today's main thing.
This topic of Halloween, Raj, Nair, it's a big topic for Christians this time of year. There's a lot of debate around it when it comes to whether or not Christians should celebrate it. What goes through your heart and mind on this topic?
Well, not just this year. I feel like this has been an escalating thing where Christians are becoming more and more discerning, being like, wait a second, especially with these decorations everywhere, decorations, if you want to call them that. I mean, what used to be like a pumpkin and maybe a skeleton has become, there's just horror movies. Explicit, graphic. In my neighborhood, there's heads chopped off. There's these like little demon things everywhere, like Satan looking beast. Everywhere. That's not just like one creepy guy down the street. It's literally every other street. My children, who I have 3 boys, 6 and under, have to walk by horror movies in 3D as they go, down the street to ride their bikes. But I think this wasn't what's important. And I don't care if this steps on toes. I think we have to realize, okay, the origins of Halloween, All Hallows Eve, it doesn't matter. I think what Halloween is right now is clearly a demonic thing. And I know there's a lot of Christians who don't want to talk about the spiritual realities that we're dealing with. But I think it's important that in 1 Corinthians, let's see if Paul talks about demons. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 20. But the sacrifice of pagans are offered to demons, not to God. I don't want you to be ignorant to be participants with demons. You cannot drink from the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. 2, you cannot have both part in the Lord's table and the table of demons. We're talking about 4 mentions of the word demons. And here's the thing. Yes, the blood of Yeshua covers us all. And the blood of the Lamb is way more powerful than the interactions of demons. But if we intentionally open the door to demonic activity and say, you know what, I'm going to just throw my kids into the deep end of the demonic dark world, they're going to be like, all right, cool. And I think we as parents need to be discerning. And I think this conversation is happening more and more and more. Billy, at least I'm saying, where Christians are like, hold on, this isn't even trying to be hocus pocus. I mean, this is explicit, dark, demonic horror movie stuff now. And so I think it's becoming clearer and clearer to those who are discerning by the Holy Spirit that something is very wrong with the way that America does Halloween.
Well, to your point, what's really interesting, I was just saying this to my wife and some friends the other day. It feels like the way that Christmas is done, right? With lights, and it's crazy, and it's, we love it and it's fun. That's how Halloween is being treated, right? People are putting lights up. I mean, I'm seeing this in my neighborhood more than I ever have the last couple of years. Those giant, terrifying skeletons, right? All these images that you were referring to, this stuff is way more prevalent in people's yards than it was when I was a kid. And so you have to make a decision whether you're a Christian who, quote unquote, celebrates Halloween or not. How are you going to present this to your kids, right? What are you going to say? What is it going to look like? That is something you have to think about in light of the verses that you just read. And, we're going to toss to a clip here in just a minute, but this ex-psychic, Jenn Nizza, who I mentioned, we've had her on many times before. She was a psychic medium from the time she was 13 years old until she was about 37 years old. She was a professional psychic. She worked in this world until she became a Christian. And when you ask her what the biggest fear she has right now, the thing that has her the most worried in culture, she has something very interesting to say. So we're going to toss to that clip right now of Jenn Nizza. When you look at the culture right now, what most concerns you?
Our culture is so plagued, and you know how I feel about it all the time, but I think my biggest concern would be social media, making the occult, making the New Age so accessible, and the illusion of it, attacking the youth, coming for the youth. Crystals and manifesting are huge on Instagram, huge. Then you have TikTok, where you have a tarot card reader, a psychic medium, right at the click of a button. You can even just scroll and watch them. They do lives. They go on there and they do lives. They do live readings. Then you have the music industry coming out here, and Satan is just putting it right in everybody's face. It's right there, attacking the kids. The Grammy shows, the Olympics. Sorry, I said it. Sorry, not sorry, but it's out there.
So Raj, she made a really interesting point in that, right? She was talking more broadly about kids, the targeting of children with the occult in stores, with products, that this is the thing on social media, right? That on TikTok, that is the thing that has her most concerned. We're talking about Halloween in context of that. Halloween is a kid's holiday. They go and they get candy. It is interesting that it seems the occult is always going after, the demonic is always going after children, trying to capture their attention and intrigue. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a perfect strategy, right? And I think it's not just, that I have an issue, or you, Billy, or my friend here watching have an issue with these practices. I mean, let's look at Deuteronomy, right? Deuteronomy 18. When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. So what are these detestable ways that God's talking about? Well, he goes on. Let no one found among you be sacrificing their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. I mean, this is serious stuff. And I know it's really easy to sweep under the rug the spiritual realities that we're dealing with, but this is like top of the line order for God to reject this garbage and to invite the kingdom of heaven into these dark spaces. And so to me, it's not that these things have power over us. It's not that these things compete with Yeshua. Of course not. But if we say, you know what, I'm going to ignore what this book says and just welcome this stuff in. Tarot cards, who cares? Like, it's a little hocus pocus. It's like, no. This is in God's systems. This is really serious stuff. So we need to be protecting ourselves and protecting our kids.
Yeah, I love that. And as a final word, I will say, I love that you read that, because it's not saying the Bible, this isn't real, this isn't true. It is saying it is real, it is true. Do not do it, avoid it. It is horrific, it is evil, it is counter to God. And that is the message that we need to take to our children. We need to protect them from these elements, these things that we know are dangerous. Do not let culture lie to them, or social media lie to them and say that it is safe to do any of these things. It opens doors you do not want to open.
I appreciate that conversation there. Important stuff this time of year. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
Yep, we have often shared these verses on the show, but we're going to do it again. 2 Timothy 3:16-17. All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. The Bible is the most important book ever written, and it has everything we need to know about God in it. So pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like I've said before, it's just convicting to remember that not just the verses we put on the refrigerator magnets, right? That all of it is God-breathed and useful. Incredible thought there, that every part of it is useful. What do we need to learn from what God has given us and revealed about his character and his will? All right, that's where we're going to leave it on today's episode of the Quick Start Podcast. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then.